From a world governed by a silver moon to another with multiple suns. From a planet-wide cityscape to a single settlement surrounded by an endless desert. The planes of the multiverse are the pockets of civilization unknowingly connected by the abyss of the blind Eternities. For over 26 years, these planes have provided the thematic backdrop to each Magic set, with several having return visits. But which planes do we want to explore next, and which do we think should be planeswalked away from, maybe for good? Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic flavour, design and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann.
Hello, Nathan Cancel.
And we're here today to talk about planes of the multiverse.
Plain and simple.
Plain and simple, that is what we're here to talk about. Yeah. Nice.
That's how I start with the
Nice. Yeah, it's cool. I like it. Yeah, sure. So last week we did a very similar episode to this when we were talking about Planeswalkers. Mm-hmm. Keeping it nice and easy, just chatting through what kind of Planeswalkers we like, what we like about them, which ones we necessarily don't need to see anymore, or we think we don't need to see anymore. And in the wankiest of terms, this makes me sound like a really wanky sort of film student, but, your characters are your characters, but the setting is also a character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm very much of the opinion that the plane should matter more than the people.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure I do agree with you on that, and this will inform a lot of our decisions.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I see what you mean. So the planes are the characters, right?
I feel like the whole point is that if you list your set names, it's not Chandra, Part 3. It's Zendikar Rising. It's Zendikar, like it's Shards of Alara.
Yeah, sure.
Or even Ixalan. Okay, yeah, we might not know if it's the continent, the plane. Who knows? It's probably both. But the whole point is that you're setting the block names up as the places you're going.
Yeah.
Whereas recently, and I think this might be why there was such a big irk on the Gatewatch arc, is that it suddenly didn't really matter where we were or what the backdrop was. Or none of it matters about that. It's all about us. This Hedron Bolasark thing that we're doing.
Sure.
It felt more like second. It felt like it was thought of second, whereas the character arcs were the more important thing.
But I think because obviously it's easier to relate to individual characters.
Yeah, I don't have to fucking relate. I don't have to relate to it.
Well, no, I suppose not. Yeah, so it's important. So the reason that Magic sets are the way that they are, and the reason that they're flavoured the way that they're flavoured, is entirely to do with the world that they're set on.
Yeah,
that's why we have sort of cards that it's like an Egyptian set, or it's
or Greek set,
or an Arthurian legend set.
Yeah, exactly.
And that obviously the way that they justify those themes is the idea that there are these multiple planes within a shared multiverse.
Exactly.
Connected,
like Doctor Who, where we go to the Pompeii episode.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, but the characters that we follow through, the reason they have these characters is because you can market those and have stories built around them long form.
I do understand that.
In the early days of Magic, when Dominaria was just the plane that everything was set on, there wasn't really this idea of a multiverse. I mean, there kind of was, but it was all set on Dominaria and, the kind of flip sides to it, like Wrath and Phyrexia and stuff.
Yeah, I guess it felt a little bit, to me, like, especially with the Gatewatch arc, like, a lot of the times the returns we were going to weren't necessarily seeing how the planes changed significantly. Or if they had, they would do things like they did with Zendikar, where they take this fan favourite plane.
Yeah.
And then because the storyline of these silly characters, these vampires and these xenophobic elves.
Yeah.
That's what's then essentially completely and utterly, literally bleached the plane.
Yeah.
And you've taken all that lovely texture, all that lovely flavour of the plane, and you've just wiped it out completely. And then go, well, oop-de-doop, I guess the Planeswalkers are on to the next place. Bye, Zendikar.
Yeah.
Which, when we look at some of like the planes, like the Planeschase and stuff like that, like the thing is, if you're going to do a very definitive style of plane, you need to make sure you either keep it true to that, or you do something quite radical with it. And if you do something quite radical with it that you can't change it back to, if you want to go back to that, let's see a nice cool jungle plane. We already did that with this plane, or we already did that with this plane. We did it with this plane.
Yeah.
So I guess we can't really do it again because it's not interesting at that
point.
And then if you do the thing which you have with Zendikar, which yes, we're getting Zendikar Rising now, so I hope that they're doing what I think they're going to be doing and trying to get us back to where we were at the beginning of the first block. Adventure World.
Yeah.
But then you've done 3 blocks just to go, well, I guess we're back where we started.
Yeah, well, I guess that we kind of worked the first time. So you just mentioned Planeschase there. So with researching this episode, we knew we wanted to do a planes episode.
Yeah.
And we thought a really good place to have a look at planes we want to see is to go to the Planeschase product. The Planeschase product, for those of you that don't know, and I actually kind of think a lot of people, either they don't know or they haven't ever played it before, which is crazy to me.
I guess we're lucky.
Well, we're lucky that you have a set of Planeschase, right? So Planeschase is not a format, but it's like an added-on product. So you have a deck of planar cards, which essentially are like world enchantments.
Yeah, they supposedly sit in the same space that your commander would in EDH, in like a command zone, separate from the game. That technically they kind of act like world enchantments, like they did back in the day. There are cards like the Abyss. Concordant Crossroads, I believe, is one as well. And there were world enchantments of where you could only have one in play from any player.
Yeah.
So if someone else was to play then a different world enchantment, you'd get rid of the other world enchantment that's in play. Yes, they sit on your side like an enchantment normally would, but it usually affected everybody.
Yeah, sure.
And the idea is that these planes will have certain effects, like, say, creatures come into play with +1/+1 counters.
Yeah, sure.
And the idea is that you're not only adding this additional effect into the game, but you are two planeswalkers bouncing around between these planes. And you can...
the really hilarious idea of you just zipping in and out of these planes.
One of my favourite canon things is just landing in the middle of Gavony and Innistrad. These two... I mean, obviously, Innistrad obviously had the Eldrazi coming anyway, but I don't know, say, like, Bant. You just randomly land in Bant. There's just two random, like, weirdly looking guys. One of them's maybe, like, a lizard person or something, which you haven't seen before because you don't have those. And then one of them summons a giant Eldrazi. The other one does Damnation. And then there's this farmer just stood there going... What the fuck just happened? Because they just bounce back out of the place. And then they zip out again
and just leave all the destruction.
Exactly.
And depending on what your idea of metaphysics of summoning creatures, they could have just left those
creatures. Yeah, they just left
a
giant Eldrazi and a giant Crater looking around going... Well, I guess... Hi, guys.
I guess that's what we're doing now. Is it Gold Meadow where you can make all the gold
Yeah.
So you just bounce into Gold Meadow.
Yeah, just all these goats appear and then you bounce to the next plane, you're surrounded by goats. You're like, where the fuck did we just go? And you can play it in multiple different ways. You can either play that each person has their own little stack of them, which is a bit too... for me, that feels a little bit too much like you take the 5 best... and most abusive ones, because the part of the reason why I like it is it's a bit more random.
Yeah, sure.
I do actually have this stack, and like the one that I have like 75 different cards. I think I'm missing about 10.
Sure.
And you basically roll a dice, and the dice will either have an effect based on the plane that you're on, or it will flip them into the next plane.
Yeah.
And you don't kind of know what's going to happen next. It could be anything from creatures with power 7 or greater can't attack, and then you're making all these Eldrazi, and then when you move off the plane.
But the point of them is that each of these planar cards have the flavour of the plane which they're on.
Yeah, the representation of an area within that plane.
So Gold Meadow, for example, is the goat sort of plane, if you like. So whenever you cast a creature, you get a goat?
Yeah, no, it's whenever a land comes into play, you get a goat. Whenever you roll the chaos, you get 3 goats.
Yeah, exactly. So each of these planes are indicative of what they do. They could be positive effects, negative effects.
Yeah, because this is from Gold Meadow in Lorwyn.
Yeah, but the really interesting thing about the Planeschase product is that it seems to have been a bit like how, say, Future Sight was for card design. Planeschase was a bit of a testing ground for planes that the development team, the narrative team, might want to see in the future of Magic.
Yeah, it was quite easy for them to just go, hey, let's make all these crazy... I guess for them it was great because you can show parts of planes we've already been to. So, for example, with Alara, you got a plane. You got a planar card of the Maelstrom. You got Bant. You got Naya. You got Grixis. So you get to see different slices of life from that one particular plane. Same with Dominaria. You get different parts of different from Dominaria as well. Same with like Regatha. I mean, it's what was good for them was to be able to not only give you extra bits of planes we've already seen before, but also go, well, let's just look at all these different tropes that we could do, say like an underwater one or like an MC Escher style plane where all of the architecture's strange. And then what would the abilities do? And also, let's just leave that for later. Maybe we might come back to it.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, notable planes that we've got that did seem to be dropped into the Planeschase. And we are going to go through some of the Planeschase planes that we, I think, are notable.
Yeah.
But one of the really notable ones is Akros.
Yeah.
Which was, or Arcos.
I think it's Arcos.
Which was a precursor to Theros, is what we eventually got. And then we got one which turned into Tarkir.
Monseng,
which was the kind of Mongolian Warring Tribes planar card, which turned into Tarkit.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, we will probably see planes in the future which we could attribute one or two, and I think we'll notice as we talk about these that there are several planar cards that we'll talk about when we go, oh, we want to go to X, Y, and Z plane, and there will be several instances where we think, oh, they could take elements from this card, that
exactly.
card. If you haven't seen these planar cards before, don't worry, you don't necessarily need to buy the products. Like Magic cards, you can find them on things like Scryfall or whatever. So if you hear something that you don't know, obviously we're an audio podcast, we can't show you, do look it up. I also in our Twitter have linked to a video done by Tyrone Community College where he actually does a review of the Planeschase product.
Oh, nice.
It's from about 3 years ago, but I would suggest you listening to it because it gives you
it might be quite difficult for you to find all of the product. I was lucky, I went to a local comic store.
Well, they originally sold it as like as these individual products with like 12 or 15 cards with decks that went with them.
With Maelstrom Wanderer came from it. I believe Vela of the Nightclads came from that
things like
set as
Sakacima's Student was
exactly.
And then they did a Planeschase anthology.
Precisely,
This was about 2 or 3 years ago as well.
Yeah, they released a couple of extra cards as well. Like one of the pre-releases for, I think it was Zendikar. I can't remember which one, but they gave you a pre-release card for it as well. So it was almost like the idea of it's quite cool because you're essentially adding an extra layer of flavour onto the game.
You're living in the world of the plane.
And you can do it in a cool way of where you play all the cards face down and you go across it like almost like a chessboard bit by bit. That's very clever as well. So it does add like a diversity to the format if you're playing, especially within Commander. It's really good because the deck's already doing wacky things and because the format's already a little bit more flexible. You can get away with having some of these effects are just bonkers nonsense.
Well, I also think as well, and this again, I put this out on the Twitter as well, is that there's been a lot of chat recently about power levels of decks and how to, the kind of social contract of Commander. Oh, my deck's a 5. What does that mean versus your 9? Your 9 could be really pants compared to my 5. Rah rah rah.
Yeah.
And we don't really talk about too much about like the hot button issues of Magic when it comes to gameplay because they change every day and we can't physically keep up.
I mean, Cyclonic Rift is always going to be a problem.
But this Planeschase product, tend to level out the decks. Because even if I'm sat over here with what I consider a super tuned deck and you're sat across from me from what is like, by all accounts, a janky deck. If we're suddenly on a plane which benefits you and not me, or does some crazy thing where it doesn't matter what our decks do, then we're having a shared game anyway.
Yeah, and then the times when it does sync up with the things that you're doing, oh boy, oh buddy.
Yeah, it gets a little bit out of hand, like
very quickly,
but it's cool. The other thing that we looked at in prep for this episode as well was something which I'd never heard of before, but you had, and that is the Rabia scale. The Rabia scale.
Honestly, it may be Rabia. We're going to call it Rabia.
We're going to call it Rabia.
If it is Rabia, oops.
I mean,
but I think it's too on the nose for Arabian to make it Rabia. So Rabia sounds good to me.
I mean, considering the amount of people that are getting in contact with us on social media, which is like 2 or 3, you're not going to tell us anyway if we're wrong. So screw you. It's Rabia. And if you are going to get in contact with us, good, because we like the exposure. So screw you anyway.
Yeah, it's good for the YouTube algorithm.
We're not even on YouTube, but it's good for the algorithm. The Rabia scale is essentially the planar version of the Storm scale, which is to say the Storm scale is Mark Rosewater's kind of barometer for whether we have mechanics returning or not. With 1 being, we're definitely going to do it again, and 10 being, we're never going to do it again because we hate it and we hate you for asking. And the Rabia scale is like that for planes. It's kind of unofficial. He talks about it on his Blogatog blog, and there is a wiki page and the articles that are adjoined to it because they're quite good for citing the resources. And so the Rabia scale is just that. So if it's a 1, that means they're definitely going to return to that plane. Notable planes which they're definitely going to return to, according to the wiki, are places like Dominaria, Innistrad, Ravnica, for example.
Places that we've returned to multiple times that have what I like to call baseline planes. Of where you've got existing stories, you've got lore to build on, you've not destroyed the plane yet, so you can. It's always open to go back to, and it's also like with Ravnica, even though I'm sure we'll talk about this in a second about fatigue. It's a fan favourite. It's always it's almost like coming home after going on holiday.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're as you say, they're planes that have got maybe a bit of a pedigree, we'll say.
Yes, exactly.
And then the 10 end of the scale is Rabia is one of the 10s. So Rabia is a plane that they'll never go back to. I think I even read somewhere they don't have the rights to Rabia.
Yeah, I mean, like, not only is the whole it was very close to, obviously it was the Arabian Nights plane. Not only was it very close to real world lore, it hasn't had any ties into anything for a long time.
Yeah, sure.
We've already had another desert plane. There are a lot of different factors into like why things are higher or lower on the list. The main three things are player appeal. Or slash past reception, like whether or not players are likely to want to go back there, whether the reception that it got was good or not. Like the fact that we're going back to Zendikar a third time probably denotes to me that the reception of the second time showed that, okay, we need to go back and fix this. Because clearly they didn't like the second telling of the story. Another thing is mechanical space. Whether it's viable in terms of what they can do in the game, of whether they want to go back there and do something. Like if they look at a plane, say Kamigawa, which is a hot button issue for me, but they'll look at all of the different, not only the reception was a little weaker, but they'll look at the different mechanics that were in the game and everything that played into the set. Is it a bit parasitic? Is it too convoluted? Is there enough design space to go back and reinvent it? Is it something that we've now done slightly differently, so we don't want to tread back on old space? That kind of thing. And then the third one that's quite important is story relevance. Whether or not we've got any threads that have been left in the lurch. Like, for example, Innistrad, I would be very surprised if we didn't go back there purely because we've left Emrakul stuck in the moon. Yeah,
there's a fucking Eldrazi stuck in their moon.
Like,
we need to go back there.
Like, the new Phyrexia would be surprised if we don't go back because there's no way they just go, oh, and then new Phyrexia took over, we're never going to go back and check on that.
Yeah, sure.
Take away the fact that Khan's obviously got an eye to use the Sylex to go and nuke them. But does it have tie-ins to the characters we're currently seeing? Is there enough likely to go forwards to go there, or is there even, like, say with Theros, of where we left it at a certain point, but there's definitely things that we can go back and finish off story-wise.
Sure.
So those three things all together are all bits and pieces that Mark Rosewater will be looking at, of especially for him. He can be, in the nice way, he can be quite cynical, or at least realistic, in terms of just because you've got a fan favourite plane, he'll be looking at going, yeah, but because we're already doing this set, and this set, we're probably not going to be able to go back and do, say, Bushido as much justice, because we clearly exhausted the mechanical space for it the first time.
In Kamigawa.
Yeah, if we were to do it anymore, like, we've probably already done other format, things like Battalion and stuff like that, it would just be changing one word for another word with a slightly different swing on it.
So some of the examples of say like the 9 and 10s on the Rabia scale, this isn't all of them, but this is the ones that are fairly notable for the various reasons that you've stated. So we've got things like Tolvada, which is Kaya's home plane. We have Wrath and Phyrexia. Serra's Realm, they're all 9s and 10s because they pretty much don't exist anymore, or they are just completely destroyed. Yeah,
Serra's Realm is an example of a plane that just doesn't exist anymore.
No, and they can still have their cake and eat it, because Serra's Realm is alive in, say, the Power Stones.
Yeah, so
on Dominaria.
They haven't completely written it out of potential canon, but it just opens up a can of worms too much. Like, there's a lot of stuff old walkery, pre-mending, that they kind of just should probably leave alone. Obviously, Phyrexia is a big thing in terms of we could probably see snapshots of it in other, like, ancillary products, but we're probably not going to see it in a modern day set. That's a big thing that I'm going to come to later.
Babylovia, which is the unset plane. Yeah. So obviously the unsets are set on Babylovia, but they're never going to have a main storyline for obvious reasons.
I also think we're probably never going to get like a Planeswalker guide or anything, because I think they'll try and keep the set as flexible as possible.
Oh yeah, it's just whatever you want it to be.
Everything in the Un-universe exists on that plane, it's like Looney Tune land.
Yeah, sure. One that's I suspect because A, the design space, and B, because of at the time the audience reception or the player reception from it, is Marcadia. Or Mercadia, which is the plane which the Weatherlight crew went to during the Weatherlight saga, where all the geographical features are kind of topsy-turvy.
Yeah.
It's the plane where goblins are the smartest race on the plane.
Yeah.
The city of Marcadia, which isn't the only city on that plane, but is the main one, is sat on the... I'm going to say the base of an upside-down mountain. So it's the top of the mountain, but the mountain is upside down, the peak is in the ground, and then the base of the mountain, which is actually skyward-facing, is where the city is formed. Now, I didn't play Magic at that time, and my experience with Marcadia comes from, A, the cards that come out of Marcadia Masks, B, me looking at the storyline, and see a lot of the plains and sort of islands and swamps. The word is lands I was going for. But for all the lands cards, because that plane looks awesome. Why wouldn't we want to go back there? But people didn't really like it at the time.
Yeah, that's the thing, is if you don't have enough of I think maybe we've come full circle in terms of like old school player cynicism of where it'd just be nice. But I think we've also come so far that it's just not, unless you've got something really interesting to go back to. Like even Dominaria, a lot of new players were like, What's
Dominaria? It's generic Fantasyland. Was it Ravnica generic Fantasyland?
It was almost like if you try and pull from too, you don't want to dig too deep. Because realistically, most of those players that like that set have had to move on to the new times and like new things anyway, and the newer players aren't going to have any idea what the hell you're going on about.
Yeah, exactly.
Plus, it has just been so long that it's just, why wouldn't have we? If there was anything relevant happening, we probably would have seen it already.
Yeah, 100%. So there is that. That's the Rabia scale. A lot of the picks of things that at least I'm going to be talking about didn't really take the Rabia scale into consideration when saying, oh, I want to go back to this plane, or I do want to see this plane in the future, but we won't because of the Rabia scale. This is going to be kind of magical Christmas Fantasyland for me in terms of what I'd like to see. And I do understand why some of my choices won't happen, or at least won't happen the way I want them to. But it is worth noting that there is some, even if it's in traditional Mark Rosewater fashion, which is to say there is no structure to it, because he likes to keep his options open, there is some thought process into saying what planes they go to and what they don't. And there is a quantifiable scale, which you can look at.
Yeah, there's no reason to say that a 1 will never be seen. Like, there might be a reason why we never go back. In the same way they might convolute some fancy way of getting back to a 10.
Yeah. I mean, also on this scale as well, you can see places like Ixalan and Kaladesh are hovering around the 5 and 6 mark, and I'd be very surprised, pardon me, if we never go back there again.
Yeah, I think Mark likes having conservative opinions, because if he's known to, if he says something too strong one way or another, everyone's going to jump on it and state it as gospel.
Yeah.
So if you do 5s and 6s for everything, go, hey, we might do, we might not, everyone goes, well, that's vague. And it's like, yeah, it's the future.
Yeah.
Of course it's vague.
So I guess the moral of this story is, if we want solid answers from Mark Rosewater, stop giving him shit. Yeah. Every time you go on Twitter. How about that? Cool. So this has been Magic the Flavouring. Thank you very much for listening.
End it there.
Cool. So let's just get on to our main topic then, Nathan, if you won't mind. Let's just talk about the planes we really want to see. What's your first pick?
See, I don't have individual planes. Well, at least I do, but like not for like a big amount of reason. Like, I want to see. So I went through like all of the different Planeschase sets. I mean, first of all, I'm going to preamble and talk generally, because I like talking generally. I'm very much played enough that I don't mind about the specifics too much. I don't mind if you show me something new. I don't mind if you show me something old necessarily. What I would like to see is, I'd like to see us following individual stories a little bit more. Like, as I was saying at the beginning, I want to explore the planes, not the people. Like, as much as I would love to see a set where we follow Angrath on a, as we said last week, on like a buddy cop adventure with someone like the Wanderer on horseback across the Western Plain. Because I want to see a Western Plain quite a lot. I want to see something that's slightly more modernised version of, like, I like Amonkhet as visually. Like, I think aesthetically it's very cool. Obviously it's a dying, decaying plane, so there's only so much you can do with that before the sand runs out.
Yeah.
But I would like to see a plane that is basically like a Mesa kind of territory, like Scrubland kind of territory.
Sure. Well, I mean, you want to see like Angrath.
Yeah, and I want to see a slow development of a story as he's exploring, kind of like Ixalan did this quite well, of where we got to explore the environment quite a lot, even if it was just one continent. I want to see sets that aren't focused on, hey, which of the who are we following this time? It's like, no, where are we? Why are we here?
Yeah.
Build up the entire plane first, and then maybe overlay some arcing story that has a little tidbit in. I mean, I know realistically over the next few sets we're going to have a lot of this person chasing this person, and this person's the fallout of the War of the Spark. But I wouldn't mind having a set that's in isolation a little bit.
So I mean, let's focus on the Western set though, because so like, say if you wanted to see a Wild West sort of set, again, there's problems with that though, isn't there? Because if you set something in the Wild West or anything kind of akin to it, you're starting to get very close in terms of world history and technology. Like Kaladesh kind of pushed it a little bit.
See, Kaladesh to me seems like steampunk, and I feel like steampunk's as far as you can probably go within the realm of like I air quoted. We did it.
Air quoted. You air quoted the word magic.
Yeah, because it's not like but is it like everything in this is magic? But in terms of like being able to fuse, like it is it clan, for example, is that science or magic?
Yeah, I mean, well, so yeah, obviously the old Weatherlight saga was very close to science fiction.
Yeah, it had a bit of sci-fi to it, absolutely.
If you go to Ixalan is around the time of, sort of pirates and trade routes from across the sea.
I guess you had the Aztec, which was like a couple of thousand years ago, and then you had the pirates, which was a couple of 100 years ago.
Yeah. But
so
they still had things like
it quite nicely.
So the issue is, and this is an issue which keeps coming up again, guns and magic.
Cannons
are guns. They had like harpoon
diamond
guns.
There's a goblin that lays landmines, for God's sake.
Yeah, well, they have explosives, and they do have. Yeah, it's real tough.
Well, I wouldn't mind doing it similar to like how they did Odd World Stranger. Have you ever watched that?
No.
Play that game? It was an Oddworld game that came out after Abe's Odyssey, and it's about a bounty hunter. And all of his weapons are natural, like insects and things like that. So his like minigun's like a hornet gun, so it fires hornets out, which is quite cool. And it has like a bolus like cheesy bug that basically fires out and it boluses around people because it's got silk string.
Yeah,
do that. Like make it a little bit more fantastic.
Well, yeah, they definitely could. I mean, the Wanderer.
It would be weird watching a
Minotaur
ride a horse. Now I'm thinking about it.
Well, but this is it. But they could change that kind of stuff up. But then they added in dinosaurs and
exactly. Yeah. But what I mean is
Aztec sort of things.
Yeah, what the idea is that I want to dial back on. We're just here for the character arcs. I want to look, because the thing about Kaladesh that was interesting is as much as you kind of ignored the side of it being a steampunk Indian inspired plane, the main reason you could ignore that is because the focus on the civil unrest. It was a socio-political backdrop that happened to have an interesting plane, not the other way around. It wasn't the plane with the socio-political on top. It didn't build the plane up and go, oh, actually, there's civil war going on. Who is it? Oh, God, it's Chandra. Right, okay.
Yeah.
Instead it was, hey, we're here to, actually, let's have a look around for a little bit. Oh, never mind that. We've got a story to get on with.
Yeah, they kind of, it could have been set anywhere.
I mean, you've got, like, the lands in Kaladesh were insane. These weird swirling, lovely, like...
the way that the ether changed the landscape,
The ether whales, like, you have literal flying whales.
Yeah, windfish.
And that's the thing that interests me in something like, say, Zendikar, was the fact that there was no grand arc that, I mean, yes, it kicked off the whole Eldrazi arc, but at the beginning, we didn't really know. We didn't know who this Sorin guy was.
Yeah.
The only person we really knew about was Sarkhan, and it was a completely different version of Sarkhan.
Yeah.
We did have a tie-in of Jason, a bit of a tie-in from Chandra, but in general, they built up this adventure plane first.
Yeah.
This idea of the royal, this idea of these sky ruins. This is what I want. I want diversity from my plane that isn't just, here's this continent, or literally, here's a city.
Interesting. All right, this is where me and you are going to differ slightly then.
Which is fine. It's okay to have different opinions, but this is what I want to have some non-linear storytelling. I wouldn't mind just having something where we don't have to just keep moving to the next chapter to see what the person's doing. More the fact that we get to explore properly.
I mean, is this again? This is where the problem comes in with the fact that they're doing block structure that's not, say, 2 or 3 sets per
it
block.
feels like a chapter of someone's story.
But
rather
then
than
with
having
Eldraine, I didn't feel like Eldraine didn't have world building in it, and I think maybe that's because when we came into Eldraine and we came into this Grimm's Fairy Tale meets Arthur world, the characters which we followed predominantly, the Kenriths, were of that world.
Yeah, so, and they were kind of newish.
And they were, they're exploring that world. I mean, this kind of goes against what I was saying last week about I wanted Arlen Cord because she's a world-weary character. But if we have these planeswalkers, which the whole conceit about the planeswalkers is that we follow them as they bounce around. Yeah. The problem is that wherever they go to, they're going to feel out of place.
Yeah, it's the Harry Potter effect of you're seeing everything for the first time through a first person.
Yeah, so
view
really all
of your character.
they can only focus on their own story, because if you just do a world building set, then it's just going to be, the game is just going to be about like tourism. It's just them going sightseeing. Yeah. Whereas, if you maybe once we go to a new world, we don't have it because it's the Gatewatch going there or whoever. It's because we are like Eldraine going into it as like a setup for something 2 or 3 years down the line. And you can tell these long form stories that way as well, and that will help.
Yeah, like Garrick wasn't important to be in there, but maybe planting him there was important for...
He kind of fit in that world though.
And it worked, that's the thing, it worked.
Same with Oko. Oko's not from Eldraine.
No, and it just worked within the premise of... It felt like a Shakespeare play.
Yeah.
Like, it really felt like a Shakespeare play, which... Obviously, being English helps. I don't know why my affinity for Shakespeare is greater than anyone else's is.
Yeah, just because you're English.
But I mean,
we understand it better than anyone else does.
That's quite. I felt like Eldraine was trying to rectify the things that like Lormin did. It already knew the texture of its plane, and it already knew that it was trying to do a certain justice, I think. And also, but again, a lot of that came down to the fairy tales don't come down to the environment, it comes down to the characters, like the big bad wolf and the 3 little pigs and the wicked witch and the evil stepmother. Yeah. We're still character based.
Sure, but I think those characters were informed by their surroundings.
Yeah,
the fact that they could exist in this magical fairy tale world. Right?
And I like the idea of the wilds being very different from the courts. I mean, this is why Corey is going to be interesting, because it's a Behemoth plane. Mm-hmm. And we've got Vivian there, but we don't really know that much about Vivian. So if anything, we're going to learn when we're learning about the character and a plane at the same time, it works quite nicely. When we're just learning about a plane because we already kind of know the character.
But what we do know about Vivian, and again, this is why it works. I think maybe now that they don't have to focus on the Justice League, maybe now they can focus on individual planeswalkers. And we can develop their character because we do know that Vivian has an affinity for beasts. Mm-hmm. She has an affinity for creating beasts or for taming beasts, and she's from a plane. We don't know anything about Scala, but we do get the idea, if they have this kind of affinity for animals, that they are kind of a human or a bipedal civilization living amongst animals and living amongst the beasts. So it fits.
Yeah.
Whereas if you would say chuck even someone like Chandra, or if you chuck Vraska into a Courier world, then suddenly it's like, oh my lord, this Gorgon has to now take on this giant beast.
And it's more about the Gorgon than it is about the plane that they're
in. Exactly. Yeah. Weirdly, it did work for Ixalan, but I think that's just because the writing in for the Ixalan block was
fantastic. It was very, very good.
Cool. Well, I'll tell you what, my ones then, so I do have specific planes that I'm really desperate to see, and you've come at this from a very studious, analytical idea of what you want to see from the story, whereas I've come at this from, I want to see this because meh. Okay. So my favourite one is the one that I'm desperate to see, and this is in the Planeschase set, is IR.
I think it's ear.
We need to get like an audiobook of this Planeschase set.
I think it's ear.
Alright, so ear then. So ear is the plane that I want to see. Now ear is the plane where the Fomori are from. The Fomori are the giant warriors who are goat people, essentially, which Ruhan of the Fomori is from, and you also have Nomad of the Fomori, which is a future sight card.
Future sight card, yeah. Like there's so Turry Island is the plane.
Turry Island is the location in the
it makes creatures you control cost 2 generic Leicester cards, and then you can roll your Chaos dice, look at the top 3. I'm not sure if it's all creatures or a creature, but it's one of the two. You either put all creatures from the top 3 into your hand or a creature from them. Yeah,
and the image on this Turry Island is this rocky citadel in amongst a raging sea.
It's a bit Minas Tirith.
It's very Minas Tirith, but it's kind of off the coast of some landmass that we can't see, and it's all rocks and ocean, and it's raining, and there's a big eye, which is the eye of the Fomori, which we can see in Ruhan's art, sort of carved into this big rock face. And from what I gather, looking at the creature cards, which we know are associated with it, and just in general the sort of typography, is that this is a plane that's kind of based on ancient Irish myths. Yeah. So not the same way like it's fairy tales for Lorwyn, but the more kind of
it's not Nomad's the wrong word for it. But...
Well, if you go into West Island, the country, they do have a bunch of those sort of little islands off the coast of the West
Giant's
Coast.
Causeway, and
things like that. So this is where it fits in.
It feels less twee. It feels more.
It's much more brutal.
Yeah.
And it's much more sort of tribal, and it's about like barbarians and things like that. And it's obviously creature based, but it doesn't seem to be creatures as in like these minus creatures. It seems to be about society of creatures. And there's several reasons I want to go there. I love the aesthetic.
If you could get the artwork. I don't know who does the artwork for
I can't quite remember.
Yeah, just get them to do the entire set.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, Wayne Reynolds.
Yeah, so just get Wayne Reynolds to do the entire set.
Hang on. So we have just looked it up, to our shame. It's Raymond Swanland. Of course it is. He does all the artwork for it. So yeah, Raymond Swanland. So if you get him to do all of the artworks, please, because that would be great. But just in general, I like the idea of having a plane. So I've noticed that they've done cycles of sort of locations, and it makes sense to kind of keep things fresh. They always seem in a year's kind of rotation to have some plane which has like a very heavy society and has like quite a bustling creature base. So things like Ravnica are good for this.
Yeah, Ravnica's great for it.
Dominaria is good for this. Zendikar is good for this because there's a lot of different creature types. And then they'll do a set.
Anymore.
Well, not anymore, but it did. And it had all those creature types seem to have some sort of society. And then they'll have
Theros as well. I guess you have
Theros as well, yeah. And then they'll have a set which is based on something a bit more sparse and is less about like the trappings of society and is more about sort of man versus nature, but obviously man's the colloquial term for whatever creature type they're using. So it's like, thing versus nature. And planes like Amonkhet have this because the terrain was a big part of Amonkhet.
Yeah. The fact we didn't get to explore the outside the Heckma was really annoying, actually.
Yeah, but that's a really good thing. Tarkir as well, even though they had these societies of tribes, the terrain in the Tarkir, these kind of harsh, barbaric worlds, were really good for that kind of thing. And they kind of flip-flop between. I'd argue that Ixalan's in there as well, because a lot of the terrain of Ixalan kind of influence.
Well, it was a lot about on the sea and through the jungles.
Yeah, exactly.
And even Orazka and all the different Like the City of Gold was quite cool as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Ixalan was just a very
so
nice.
they kind of, they balance these two ideas of it being very much about the creature types in the set, or about being sort of, the terrain of the set.
Is it about the people in the plane, or is it about the plane itself?
So I feel like Ear could fit very nicely into that kind of more brutal set, that more barbaric set, where it's less about, people are trying to like solve some social political issue.
Yeah.
It's more about just trying to survive the plane.
It's a mana-rich environment similar to Zendikar, so what does that do when it accelerates the environment and it accelerates your cultures?
I also really love Ruhan as a card. He was one of my first commander decks that I built, and I also, this kind of goes into my obsession with creature types. I'm really desperate for them to errata the two cards we already have, but it's also to move forward to call them goat giants or goat warriors.
But I feel like giant should be in the same way like elder dragon or elder dinosaur. I feel like giant is more of a class, where it feels like an aspect of a class rather than
so like they're both
race.
So Ruhan, for example, is a giant warrior, and I kind of think that's great, I suppose, but he's a goat. Yeah. But this is what I think. It'd be really nice design space for them to kind of bring in a tribe which they give a lot of support for in a kind of a jokey way, but to actually make it something they properly do. So I'm really excited.
Plus, it allows
about
goats then to have more synergy as well.
Absolutely, 100%. If that's what you're into, so that's what I really, really love.
Am I into goats?
Well, I mean, for example, I know there's someone at our LGS that runs a cat deck that has no Leonin in it.
Yeah,
because they don't consider them to be cats.
Yeah. Oh god, yeah. So.
There we go. Another one which I'm really excited to see, and this is actually the same sort of idea. I think there's definitely a theme to the things that I want to see. I really want to see Kaldheim.
Yeah.
Where's Kaldheim? Isn't it interesting that Kaldheim about a year and a half ago was the set that everyone's like, yep, cool, Kaldheim, that's where we're going next. Yeah. 100%. We've seen like artworks for it. Somehow we've seen artworks for it.
This is the problem. This is the problem when we get given little tidbits of when Angrath showed Huatli Kaldheim, like a touch of it when he's showing off planeswalking. But you're like, oh, that means we're definitely going to go back. And we had, crazy Teemo coloured guy. One of the, I can't remember now. It was in one of the games. And he's a crazy shaman. And you see him and he's from Kaldheim. You're like, oh, okay, cool, Kaldheim.
Is Saskia's from Kaldheim?
No, we're not sure. Saskia looks like she's from a ghoulish.
Yeah, it's more like
G-A-U-L,
as in like the kind of French
G-A-A.
barbarians.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to, But this is it. This is why I want to see Kaldheim. And actually, here's my pitch to Wizards of the Coast. They should do. It would be almost this is why they won't do it, because they've already done Lorwyn and Eldraine, so they can't really do European history again anytime soon. But if they were to, I'd suggest just doing Barbarian World and have it set so each
almost like the beginning of Gladiator.
So you can have Ear, which has like the Irish tribes. You can have the Gallic tribes or the Gallic tribes, and then you can have the Vikings and Norse tribes, and they all occupy this same world. And we're not trying to say like, oh, all European history is exactly the same, because there are differences between all these tribes.
So if you did say like a fight over the Baltic Sea, not obviously the Baltic Sea, but if you had like
some analog, and it could just be this idea of going, hey, we want to do a world where it's all these different warring tribes from a similar part of history.
Coastal siege would be quite cool as
and
well.
These are the things that we're taking inspiration from. I think that'd be perfectly fine. So Kaldheim is definitely one I want to see, and they've been teasing it for a long time. Kaldheim is the Viking world. It's the ice world.
Well, as you've put here as well, you've put Valor as being afterwards, because this is one of those Planeschase cards, Immerstrom, and it's basically a warplane. And it's just, if you would get a chance to read up on the Obnixilis origin story about when he's a world conquering tyrant, and this is what it reminds me of, this idea of I would love to be dropped in, and this is going against what I said about world building in terms of world building a plane. I like the idea of also where the plane doesn't necessarily matter at all, because most places aren't going to be uniquely diversely different. You can't have every single. It's like with Star Wars, of how you have the ice plane and the desert plane and the jungle plane. There's only so many different tropes you can do before everything has to get a little bit more blended. But I wouldn't mind just dropping into the middle of a warring plane. Everything's going to war. Not like with Zendikar, we've built it up and it's the
planes
a
are being
Lovecraftian.
Destroyed.
It's like the societies within it. Like,
that's why Tarkir was good.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. We had this almost like
tribes.
warring factions, and you could make them. The problem with Tarkir is you had to factionize it. I find the issue with the colour pie sometimes with Magic is it makes sets feel very much, which are the 5 different parts of the set?
Yeah.
Which are the 5 different parts of the plane? Like with Nyx, how each different colour had its own its own little denizen area. I don't mind it because it gives you automatic expansion. It gives you automatic.
Well, it's the way that they have to make the game work.
Yeah, but when it becomes too formulaic, it starts to get a bit predictable. That's the only thing. So I wouldn't mind dropping into the middle of, say, something like Valor, or as you say, like a Nordic set, also, of where you are in the middle of like a big siege, like a world war essentially.
Yeah,
you start bad and you see it dissipate instead of the other way around, of where we usually see it at the beginning of the war and then it builds to a climax.
Yeah, you want to just drop in.
Start right at the climax and then watch it dissipate back down to normality.
Yeah,
again,
so this could be a good option for that. The Valor was brought up by one of the guys that follows us on Twitter, and we did a shout out to what planes you want to see from Planeschase, and they very quickly spotted that Valor, obviously not only naming convention sounds a lot like Valhalla, but could be related to Kaldheim. Even though they're two separate planar cards, they could actually be drawing inspiration from the same place. Yeah. And my idea was that you could have Kaldheim, and then Valor is kind of the afterlife in that plane. The same way that Nyx to Theros, you could have Kaldheim and Valor, or some sort of day-night cycle, a little bit like Lorwyn. Just an idea.
Well, this links into one of the things I want to say is that I'd like to, and this is, we talked about them literally just before recording. I like the idea of shockingly, as you'll notice, I don't like predictability. I like bucking the norm. I like things that are a bit different. And what we haven't seen really, outside of say Ravnica and Agarium, where we have like the spirit plane that's overlaid over the top, is when we see a set with two planes. And I know this is difficult metaphysically wise, because how does the blind eternities don't function the way that space does. But I would love to see two planes interacting metaphysically with each other. Say, like, imagine two planes colliding. Like, so you've got two very physically colliding.
So, well, but then how do we justify that in the metaphysics of the multiverse?
It's magic. You come up with some bullshit reason.
Sure, they have stated in the past that within the metaphysics of the blind eternities, which is the kind of space between the planes, that there are planes that are nearer to each other and further away from each other, but not in the same way that celestial bodies in our space work.
Chandelier literally trumps about the blind eternities, constantly moving between areas.
And they do say that Dominaria is the centre.
Quote unquote centre. And we'll get onto this a little later when we talk about some of the other sets from the Planeschase.
Yeah.
There is a spatial relevance to everything and an orientation, but I would like to see, in the same way that we saw the convergence of the shards of Alara, I would like to see two planes not necessarily colliding, but maybe working like they orbit one another. Like I'd like to challenge
like in tandem with each other.
I'd like to challenge the metaphysics of magic. Yeah. If we keep if I understand restriction breeds creativity, to quote the great man himself. But point being that if you restrict yourself so much down, you pigeonhole.
Yeah,
I wouldn't mind the option of every now and again you can just expand the idea. I
think that'd be quite cool.
Bit.
Yeah, or if there's you'd like two individual planes rather than one plane that maybe has two levels of existence.
I don't want Theros and Nyx.
Yeah,
I want two distinct civilizations or planes or whatever.
Yeah, sure.
That they're trying to find a way to mix it. Imagine, say, for example, a arid plane meets an underwater plane. For example, that kind of idea of not splitting the difference, but I wouldn't mind seeing two things that are directly complementary to each other, but almost accidentally.
Ear and Gobekhan we could have.
Yeah, exactly.
Although Gobekhan, weirdly enough, is a 9 on the Rabia scale. I'm not going to go there. Another shout out I will just say to a couple of the answers that I got from our little sort of Twitter discussion was a couple of people who I know are newer to Magic cited the card Cliffside Market, the planar card Cliffside Market, which is in Marcadia as somewhere that they would like to go, specifically because they'd want to explore the marketplace itself and see these. So it's interesting that you said you weren't necessarily that fussed about seeing these little contained areas, whereas I actually really agree with this guy when he says about the marketplace, because I would actually really love to see maybe just a one set block where it is just a really low-key local scuffle between, say, like a magistrate and the market, or rival gangs of maybe thieves and sellers in a marketplace. It doesn't need to be these big courts or armies. It could be something really small,
so kind of similar to how we did with the Kaladesh Civil War, but without the annoying
overlay of it being about the planes.
With Ajani having a mech suit and things like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I
liked Kaladesh. It was just a bit too big.
Yeah, also take away these characters that we already have all this preamble for, and suddenly we can focus on the idiosyncrasies of the plane instead of just, I guess we just somehow Tezzeret's head Supreme Judge.
Yeah.
Even though his filigree, his use of artifice is completely different to everything. That's fine. That's fine. Sure. Cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'd like to see, I'd like, as you say, an intimate plane would be quite nice. Like the day in the life of scenes from Ravnica sometimes are lovely.
Yeah, by Nikki Drayden, right?
Yeah, and even just little things, the fact that Liliana's a special type of coffee that she likes. I could just imagine her sitting in a little square. Like, sometimes we don't need it to be the end of the fucking world.
Yeah, I mean,
sometimes it can just be...
do a lot to do with
that. It can just be a Tuesday. Can it just be a Tuesday? Can I just come buy some lemons, please?
Yeah. I don't know how you could do a whole set based on one.
Well, this is why I like
day.
Fiora, because Fiora did the same kind of thing that Ravnica did, but it did on a light scale, and it did it very, very simple.
Just within one.
I say simple again, quoting a simple murder plot for a Spirit King. But
yeah. But it was within the confines of a very small court of people.
Yeah, but this is why I'd like to see somewhere like Rabia, because I'd like to see an Amonkhet where it's not a dystopian, factory for souls.
Yeah.
I would like to see it in its hustle and bustle. Which I guess also then brings me back, like, to the only other point of things that I'd like to see is I don't mind so much about telling story in a canonical timeline.
Yeah.
I wouldn't mind the fact that we aren't able to see certain planes, like we'll never be able to see Phyrexia again because it doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. Why can't we just have a set where we go back in time? Like, or Kamigawa's going to be like my big one, because I
think it is for a lot of people.
Because I think it definitely sits on I agree, it sits on the line of they probably can't do it again, but it sits so close on the line that it's so easy to argue that they should just go, fuck it, bollocks, do it anyway.
I mean, this is we're talking about planes we'd like to see in a main set, but these are obviously all things that they can do and have done in things like
Legends will probably see lots of old stuff. It's like we're never going to see Wrath because it's overlaid into Dominaria and it's from back in time. Fair enough, I get that, but I would like the idea that we don't always have to see everything in a chronological canonical order.
We don't necessarily need to be pushing the modern day story if we can tell different stories.
Yeah. We could go back, if we could always go back and see a set. Obviously, there's a huge amount of story arc for the Weatherlight Saga and everything like that, but if there are any other parts of where they've just dropped so this person went to this plane at this point. Like, say, for example, Dyfed and Urza went to, and we'll talk about this a little later with some planes. They go to see certain planes that are really interesting. Why can't we just do a day, like, go, but it's almost like, I'd like to call it anthology. Like, I know they already call certain sets anthologies, but it'd be nice to have a magic, like, I don't know, a magic legend. Again, the problem with Magic, they've used all the words up. There are no new words. But I wouldn't mind seeing something like, this was this year on this plane, and let's go back in time and have a look, like, through the story almost.
Sure.
That'd be quite cool.
A couple of bits before we move on to planes that we'd actively don't necessarily want to see again. Just a couple of shout outs to planes that I know, either talking through people on our LGS or on our Twitter feed. Just give a shout out. People really want to see Mirrodin again. Mm-hmm. I think the people who want to see Mirrodin again, really what they want to see are the Mirrans and like the new Phyrexia style thing.
Well, now Mirrodin has gone.
Yeah. So we will see new Phyrexia. And Alara is something that people really want to go back to, which we kind of would have gone to if the Chandra comics had kept up. We would have at least seen them through at least a storyline. But there we go. So people definitely want to see planes that we haven't been to for a long time. Like, newer players definitely want to swing back to these places.
How does Alara look now we've had the convergence?
Yeah,
is it still 5 distinct realms, or are they all trying to do their best to link up together?
Yeah. All right, so that was planes that we really wanted to go back to. Now let's move on to planes that we don't necessarily want to see again, or maybe at least just for a little while. I think, like Mark Rose Warsaw, we might need to be a little bit flexible and maybe not sort of bin everything, but have planes that we maybe are a little bit sick of. And I'll kick off because I got something of a hot take. I think it's a hot take because I have been shouted at before. I'm really fucking sick of Ravnica. Yeah?
That's fair.
I think it's fair. Think it's fair.
This is your second time now, isn't it? Because you didn't do the first. You weren't.
I wasn't here. Yeah, I wasn't here for City of Guilds and the first run through. Although, I mean, having said that, I have played with cards and I do understand the history of Ravnica and all that kind of thing. But actually being here during a set, and I love Ravnica. I will say that now. I'm not a Ravnica hater. I'm not a hipster that's going to sit here and go, because it's popular, I don't like it. I really love it. I love everything about it. The problem is that I think they just kind of used up so much of their clout with Ravnica in terms of not only did they have individual stories set on Ravnica in between 2012 and now, which were the two kind of times where they've been there. Not only did they have the individual stories, but they kept referencing it in other things. They kept having Jace being tied to Ravnica in a story.
Yeah.
They kept having the guilds be something which a lot of design space for the dual colours get put upon. We still call those things Golgari, Dimir, is it? As shorthand. But I think also a lot of the design for those cards in the game still feel like, Boros is on Amonkhet.
Yeah.
Or whatever. And I think they just used up a lot of their kind of emotional energy and sort of, clout with the player base for it. I also think it was maybe a wee bit of a mistake in terms of keeping the plane fresh to do 2 sets followed by a third in War of the Spark.
Yeah.
Because War of the Spark, as much as it did focus on the story of what it was trying to tell, still had a huge element of Ravnica involved.
Yeah.
And I think now they're not going to retire it. I don't want them to retire it, but maybe even so it was 7-ish years between doing the last 2 sets while we were there. Maybe we need like a 10.
Yeah.
Just don't go there for like a decade.
We don't need. It'd be nice to come back to see what Niv's done as the Living Guild Pact. But in terms of storylines, we've kind of they will still reference it from a jumping point. I think it makes a lot of sense still to use it as their main base of operations. But it's funny that you say about using up design space, because I completely agree. I think the problem we'll look at, especially looking at some of the random planes that are dropped in Planeschase, is that when you do 10 distinct guilds and they all do quintessential color pairing, like these color pairings are so important to Magic because from the 5 colors, you're now diluting it down to being 10 different identities you can attribute yourself to. It's a lot harder to do it for wedges and for shards, like to say, am I more Bant or am I more like, Grixis or whatever? Because the more colours you add in, the more it has to encompass, and the more individual it has, with the less individual it feels, or the more individualistic it's going to feel if you're very much into, I like necromancy, specifically evil necromancy, I'm Grixis, compared to, say, like the Golgari way of doing it, or like the Orzhov way of doing it, blah, blah, blah. Like, you are setting definitive psychographics with these colour combinations.
Well, Abzan's kind of like a friendly necromancy, isn't it?
Well, no, I like to think of that as more as ancestry rather than necromancy. It's more like, shut up, Mum, I know what I'm doing, but you haven't eaten your green. Can you just pass on, please? Like, can you just go away? I know how to live.
If anyone's tuning in now, that just sounds like some kind of weird psychodrama you're having about your own upbringing.
That is literally every day of my life. No, please, Mum, if you are listening, I love you. So the problem is that if you do this very, very well, and they've done 3 different sets. So most of them, they've done 3 different mechanics. Eventually, it's really hard to make an evolution set or an evolution block or anything like that doesn't just automatically go, well, that's just Simic with extra colours, or, oh, well, that's just Golgari with extra steps. Like, when you do such a good job of identifying 10 different guilds, as well as the guild list within one set, not only can you not do one set. Like, what I like about War of the Spark is it didn't really feel like it needed to focus at all on the guilds whatsoever, and it still felt like an isolated, decent set. And you still had cards within it that still felt like, I'm an Izzet card.
Yeah, I guess I still felt it was very Ravnica.
Every single set before War of the Spark was guilds. Get them while they're hot. There's Sunday.
What guild are you?
Yeah, everything's so shoehorned, and it
Orzhov for life, by the way.
It's fair enough. I'm still stuck between Izzet and Boris, I think, in terms of play. I don't know. I'm just Jeskai. I'm not gonna lie. I'm Jeskai. But the problem is that not only does the Mads. I mean, don't get me wrong. They did do well with the Mad Science of Innistrad. Felt slightly different to the Mad Science of Izzet, even though it was still lightning based kind of thing.
Izzet cards were still into that idea. Sure.
Yeah, and the problem is if you do 10 different factions within a set, not only are you having to get enough cards for each of those sets, and you're probably going to have to split them into 2 to do 5 here, 5 there, because it's just impossible to do it all in one, because Dragon's Maze was an absolute clusterfuck pile of nonsense. It was not good. Do not draft that set. But you also then take away a lot of ideas that you can then do a big whole set on. Like, I feel a little bit like when we go to Toruzon in Ixalan, it's going to feel a little bit just like Orzhov, but instead of vampires and spirits, just vampires. And it's going to feel very much like, is this just Orzhov with less gold cards and more
is that I don't, it's
just
not,
black or white
it's not
cards?
even just what the cards do and what they stand for. I think the aesthetic, maybe. And this is it. Ravnica is so good. That's the problem. It's so good that it kind of overtakes everything else.
You can't do weird chaotic cults because Rakdos does it so much better than you could do it otherwise.
Something like Golgari. If I was just to say the word Golgari, then anyone who has kind of understanding of what that means for Ravnica is immediately picturing things like insects, fungus, death, dredge.
Scavenge,
whereas
it makes sense.
The relationship between black and green is that, but it could also be something completely different,
Yeah, like, with Jund, you add the red in to make it a predatory evolution kind of thing, but it almost feels like you cover so much ground, there's not much ground left to cover.
So I just think, as much as we'll never get away from the idea that Ravnica is what it is and what it means for the game, I just think they could afford to give it as a main set plane. They can still explore it in other ways, but as a main set plane, they could probably retire it and then in 10 years' time go, we're going back to Ravnica, guys, and then, it'd be absolutely fine.
And they could probably do with diluting the Ravnica of Ravnica down a little bit.
They could change it up.
Every time they go to Ravnica, it's so Ravnica that it's almost like they can't help
But it's so Ravnica, but also it's a little bit of a cheat. They keep having this idea that it's all located within the 10th district.
Yeah.
Even though Ravnica is like a planet-sized city.
Yeah, technically, 90% of the plane hasn't probably been explored. Fuck off! No, shut up!
It's a real cheat.
No,
it absolutely
just insane. After this many sets, we've seen most of the plane. It's not as if you go around the other side and go, oh, there's actually a forest on the other side. We didn't realise.
You've never been to like the ski resort over on the other side
the dark side of Ravnica.
Yeah, exactly. So another one which is a little bit of a similar one. Oh, by the way, that Ravnica thing, I have been shouted at about it, but I also have had people agree with me, so I can't be too far off.
Right.
The other plane which I think that they should give a rest to after they explore it in the coming months is Zendikar. I've honestly
Leave Zendikar alone.
No, this is the flip reverse for me. I don't really like Zendikar. I don't really like it. And
you didn't play during the first iteration.
But I understand what it was about.
No, you don't, man. You don't know what it was like.
I wasn't there.
You weren't there, man. It's like sending your kid off to school and it's with a lovely comb over and it comes back with its shirt untucked. And you're like, what have they done to you? And it's swearing.
Maybe it's because, so maybe I'm going to go really meta about my understanding of this then. So the idea that it has all these sky ruins and it's like the plane is alive and it's all shifting and it's all this, that and the other. They have used aspects of that because people loved it so much. They've used aspects of that in the aesthetic of a lot of other planes. So maybe like floating islands and stuff. A lot of the new Ravnica stuff, for example, had these kind of floating islands. Things like Serra's Realm has all these floating platforms. Yeah. The idea of like the ground being alive, now that things like world souls are becoming more common. Yeah. That's not really like a super special thing.
And the annoying thing is that since the Eldrazi have been kicked off plane, the Royal doesn't technically exist anymore because the Royal was like the spasmic reaction that the plane had to having these titans trapped on it.
Yeah.
So it's almost annoying that Zendikar as I knew it, which was this crazy, what I love the idea is that planeswalkers go there for an adventure. They want to go and get this crazy item. They go, they're probably going to die because Zendikar is so crazy powerful, mental, crazy, and that's what I liked about it. And then it turns out that it's only crazy mental because of this secret that we trapped away millennia ago that they'll never know. Oh god, someone let them out, and then it completely ruined the whole plane. And then the plane sat there going, identity crisis. I don't even know who I am anymore. Yeah.
This is the Eldrazi you're referring to.
Yeah,
right?
Who was I before the Royal? Who was I before? And this I guess what we're going to find out in Zendikar Rising.
Well, okay, so I'll see when they come back to Zendikar for a third time. This will be like a super fresh one for me. But again, I don't want to have these marquee planes just be constantly revisited to, because also it breeds disappointment.
Yeah.
People are so disappointed with Battle for Zendikar.
Is it a retcon? And if you're doing a retcon, you're having to literally make a retcon set. And I don't mind that because again, it feels like we know we ruined it. And don't worry, I love the aesthetics of the Eldrazi. I thought it was amazing. It was just, why did you take one of my favourite, aesthetically, one of my favourite planes, one of the most vibrant planes, and go, that's the plane we want to bleach? And not only that, mechanically, the ally thing didn't work.
No.
Devoid was a bit too parasitic with Ingest. It just didn't carry in so many ways, and they know. I mean, Mark Rosewater will probably say it's his probably greatest disappointment. Behind closed doors, he might absolutely hate Ravnica as well. Who knows? But spokenly and artificially, he doesn't like that because he knew that it let down all the expectation from the plane that it originally had, all the new things it offered. It didn't deliver on in quite the way he wanted it to. And you could have done this. Imagine, and this is one of the big things that they say is, imagine if we'd gone to Innistrad first, had the mystery of Emrakul, not knowing that the Eldrazi were involved, and then we'd gone to Zendikar and said, "Oh my god!" and they're completely ravaging Zendikar and save the plane.
Yeah.
And said it was, wait, we're back here already. Well, what have they done? Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, they're ruining the plane.
The Eldrazi are a big part of it as well. I think one of the reasons I think we need to put Zendikar to bed is because, they have Eldrazi on Innistrad, but that was more as the kind of gimmick. But Zendikar is now the Eldrazi plane. So
the thing is, now they're gone. This is the thing. Now they're gone. Now they're not the Eldrazi plane.
I want to see Eldrazi on somewhere different.
And also going from a Courier to Zendikar Rising, how are they going to make it different? I mean, the whole point of Zendikar was it had these giant Baloths, these horrendously huge giant, like the Oran Reef is mental huge.
Yeah.
And so they're gone, right, so we can't really go back and change it back to what it was. So let's give you a Courier, let's give you all these crazy landscapes and everything, and then let's go back and try
we'll see.
Are they going to do the cultural thing of trying to go?
One thing I do like about Zendikar, which I would be sad to sort of see go when we're talking about how they explore colour pairs and things, I do like the vampires, the black-white vampires on Zendikar. I think they're very, very interesting.
They're just black. You don't have I guess
They
that
are
was
black-white.
Cliffhaven. Yeah, they weren't before though. That's the thing. Zendikar one of the few sets that they probably could have done green vampires in.
Okay, sure. Well, I like the vampires
because now we've done white black in Ixalan. I'd think they'd want to go the more feral route. And that's the thing. The only thing that makes it interesting for Zendikar Rising is seeing all of the potential from the first block, and then how it was completely utterly destroyed, absolutely annihilated in the second block. What are we going to come back to? Are there going to be any civilizations left? Obviously, even Seagate's completely bollocks. Like, what? Lorthos is dead. You know,
yeah, sure. I mean, this is all stuff that we are going to see.
Yeah.
But my point is that after that,
I think it should probably leave it.
It's just leave it alone.
Unless they build up some crazy other arc again where it turns out there were 16 more, even bigger Titan. You know, I don't know. But yeah, I agree. I feel like return blocks are always going to be, and we said this when we were talking about the Rabia scale before the recording, and I said, of course we're going to go back here, and of course we're going to go back here. And it makes me sound all self-indulgent, but the whole point is unless they have a very good reason not to go back to a plane, like it's destroyed, we will. Because there's no one, they will run out of properties to do, and then they can't just keep making new ones until the end of time. But two, they'll have to go back and extend the stories of the people we already knew, the people we left. But yeah, I agree that things like Ravnica and Zendikar, once we've been back a few times, like considering we spent the first 6-7 years or whatever on Dominaria, and we only spent one set on Dominaria, and it's one of the biggest planes with one of the most diverse like environments, why aren't we just back on Dominaria for a few sets?
Yeah, but again, they did like 10, 15 years on Dominaria.
Exactly, but not recently. What are they supposed to do now? They can't do 10, 15 years anywhere because that's...
But we have a multiverse. Anyway, look...
That's the problem. I don't want to... As much as I don't want to bounce between a new set a new plane every set, I don't want to keep going back to the same one.
No, this is it. So I don't want to... I just don't want to be doing...
So what do we want then? We don't want new ones and we don't want old ones.
Well, no, I do want new ones. I want new ones. When they said, we're doing Zendikar Rising, I was like, ugh, really?
Yeah.
Like, really?
Or go back to blocks that we've only had once.
Well, they start the Bolus block with... Well, the Bolus arc with Zendikar, Battle for Zendikar. They stop the Bolus arc, and then, Eldraine, Theros, Zendikar again. You're going, well, no, you're just repeating the mistakes of the past. Leave it. Leave it alone.
I guess it does generally feel like this is the last little retcon before, because again we've talked about we're in a transition period. I feel like this is the end of the transition period of where we went from big multi-set blocks to being individual sets where we can just bounce between, do different story arcs. Even the placement of these three different chases that are going on after the War of the Spark, the fallout of that of Dovin and Tezzeret and Vraska.
Yeah, these are where they've sent off the evil planeswalkers, quote unquote, to go who have been sort of vanquished and repentant to go and find the ones that are on the run.
Oh yeah, exactly. And the idea being that like we can go to and do this on any plane, and we don't know why Dovin would have gone to this plane. So I guess then we get to explore that a little bit. I don't want it to feel too weighted in the characters. Again, coming back to let's focus on the planes more.
All right, let's move on. We're running out of time. What planes would you like to kind of bury or maybe retire if you could?
I just agree with you. I don't actually. There are certain planes that any plane that was boring enough that I don't really want to see again, I'd rather us see go back and then try and make it interesting.
Sure, that's a good way to be.
Yeah, like realistically, the appeal of like Zendikar, like literally you diluted and you literally washed it out. So the fact that I would like to then see. It just comes out to a point of if the set's boring, then go back and do something interesting with it. If we've been there a lot, just don't worry about doing it for a little while.
I mean, I guess that's fair.
I don't have an individual. I don't want to go back to their plane.
Oh well, then you're a much more sort of open-minded person than I am. Then I suppose.
Well, it's more that having played for a long time, it's more things that I want to see than things I don't want to see anymore. If I continue to see the same arcs and the same repeated, let's focus on this person's trial and tribulation in this random town, like I don't want to see things like Kaladesh.
Yeah.
I don't want to just see a random silver dispute that takes place on a new plane, super interesting, but the plane doesn't matter.
Yeah, sure.
You know, the whole point of the Aether Revolt. No, I don't care about the Aether Revolt. I mean, as much as I played Magic for the fantasy aspect of the world building part of it. I didn't care about. I don't want to read poor teen fan fiction.
Yeah, sure.
I don't care about the arguments that they're having as much as I care about where they are. Like, we'll get into this in just a second when we talk about the Planeschase cards, because there are some really interesting concepts there.
Well, let's just do that now then. Yeah. So you've written down quite an extensive list of Planeschase cards that you've picked out from the Planeschase.
Yeah, I've basically listed every single one that hasn't already got a set based around it. There are some that we've already been to in terms of the story. If we're talking about books from back in the day, there are some that we do have more information on beyond just the plane itself, the planar cards. But there are some that there are some that are very basic and It's more just a slideshow of this particular place in this particular plane, which is quite interesting.
Cool. Well, let's just run through maybe some of your top picks, your highlights.
So Xerax is something I really want to see. The card is Stairs to Infinity. It's got an MC Escher S kind of look to it, of where it's like stairs going upside down, left, right, all that kind of thing. The idea of a mind warping landscape. What I liked about going back to Innistrad is the mystery aspect and the fact that Jace was kind of losing his mind a little bit. And that was cool to me. But it was only him. Yeah. I'd like to go to a plane where everything's a little bit balmy, a madness realm. And we're going into the multitude of madness with Doctor Strange in the very near future.
Sorry, these are Marvel films.
No, this is a Marvel film.
Cool. This is Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, I know, and we can cross-reference. The whole point I'm saying is that I would like the idea of seeing a madness realm where people don't know what's going on, what's reality, and all that nonsense. And that kind of background, this idea of very warped landscape and architecture, super interesting. Wildfire, I don't think we're going to see, which is the card Nile Island. It's a plane that's covered entirely in flame and lava. The backstory, it has backstory and connection to Rabia. It had portals originally that you could go to. It's ruled by Jin, which is quite cool. We've talked about wanting to see more Jin.
Yeah, definitely.
But what I would like in this set, is a bit cliche and it's a bit on the nose, but the elemental plane of where you have the fire nation, the wind nation.
Oh, so you like creature types that are made up of elements,
or like an Avatar kind of thing, of where you go to each different continent and you have to conquer a different thing. One that's like, so I'd like to see an underwater plane. One of them is Equitana. Is one of the Planeschase cards.
Equitana, the Ether Flues.
Yeah. So Narcomoeba is a card that was originally in Planeschase. In Future Sight, Nathan.
Future Sight,
and it had it written on it that it was basically memory given form, and this was a form that didn't want to be forgotten. The idea that it can take memory and do the pensive thing of turn it into a tangible substance.
Sure.
Really interesting. But the fact it's like an underwater plane makes me... One, you can't really do you can't do a whole underwater plane, I can't imagine, without having, just following Cure around or something like that.
No, I think it's fine.
But I would like to see a plane that maybe does a focus on the elements when they're pushed to their extreme, because one of them is the Zephyr Maze, in Kineth, maybe Kineth. I don't know. We don't have.
Kineth's another plane.
Yeah, and it's the flying plane. It's basically creatures with flying get +2/+0. Creatures without flying get -2/-0.
Sure. So yeah, it's like kind of like the cloud sort of.
Yeah, and the way that
plane.
the way that the landscape's built, it looks like it's formed more with more freedom. It's almost like flowstone. It looks like,
sure,
which is a deep cut. These are the kind of, I wouldn't mind seeing the elemental set of where it kind of bridges all of these together. Vryn. I'd be surprised if we don't see Vryn.
So this is the home plane of Jace.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The Trial of the Mage Rings is the card that's in the Planeschase set. It's Jace's home plane. More likely that we'll see it again. I'd be surprised if we didn't. This is the one which will probably sit as like a 6 or a 5 or a 6 on the Rabia scale, but I'd be surprised in the extent of Magic if we don't go back to see this at some point.
Vryn's really interesting, actually. Out of all the ones you put down, again, because you're right, this is one that we should be seeing. And you've written down here that this is actually quite in its idea, if you were just to pitch it as an idea without showing people any art of it, seems like very much like Kaladesh. It's kind of magic meets technology.
Yeah, because I think it's the power's diminishing, so they have these measuring networks which funnel the ether. And I put Mortal Engines / Laputa style, so like Laputa Castle in the Sky, the Ghibli film.
Yes,
or
Ghibli.
Mortal Engines, where they have those cities that basically... I know we did a film recently on it, but I read the book back in the day.
The motorised cities.
And this idea of almost like it's almost like post-apocalyptic.
Sure.
Like, I like this idea for Magic, of going to a set where we've seen it's already had a technological advancement past the point of what we'd normally be able to show.
Yeah.
But if you actually look at Trial of the Mage Rings, that is so futuristic beyond what we'd be able to do as a civilization on Earth, that it's almost like it goes beyond.
I think a good way to kind of think about Vryn when you were describing it to me is like, so if Kaladesh is kind of like the really bright, joyful style of Studio Ghibli, where it's all like steampunk and magic sort of technology, like Howl's Moving Castle, Laputa Castle in the Sky, those kinds of things, then Vryn is the kind of, as opposed to steampunk, is the kind of really gritty diesel punk, kind of like the darker side of these kind of post-apocalyptic things where it's technology meets magic, but it's kind of, it feels very grimy, feels very run down. And in all those Studio Ghibli films, you have the joyful side, but then usually there's some kind of antagonistic element that uses these magics to create like war machines.
Yeah, and there's usually
things like that.
Because there's usually civil dispute.
It's usually some kind of plane or something that they've got. So
I like the idea of that. And it could also then, I mean, that's in my mind now, I'm thinking, man, if they do a new Phyrexia arc, Vryn would be be a great place to start.
Vryn would be a very good place to start.
Okay, so looking at... Oh, this is a really, really good one. Purelia, or Perulia.
Pyrulia?
Pyrulia?
Pyrulia.
Let's go Pyrulia. This is shown in two different cards. Horizon Bowels is the plane card in the Planeschase that has it. It's also Horizon Canopy, which is the card that was originally in Future Sight that they've just released as a set for... was it Modern Horizons? Yeah, Modern Horizons.
Yeah, Modern Horizons, like Fiery Islet. All the lands.
idea is this is a concave plane. This is within a Dyson sphere. So the idea is that they'll have a source of energy in the middle, and then they'll have a plane that's kind of wrapped around it in a giant sphere. This plane is covered by vegetation where the leaves are like the size of a football field, and you can walk along them. And this was originally explored back in the day in the book The Thran by J. Robert King, where Dyford, who is the planeswalker who basically showed Yorgmoth the ropes. Yeah. And they basically go to this plane. It's the only time it's mentioned outside of these two cards. And the fact that it's put in a Future Sight card doesn't make me feel like it's definitely going to happen, because Graven Cairns, as much as it was released as a card, was part of Lorwyn, and it didn't really have any giant tie-in, so it probably won't hold any water to say that, okay, it was a future shifted card, so maybe we'll see it. But I'd love to see this idea of...
Dyson sphere plane sounds
I want to
cool.
see metaphysics outside the norm. I don't want to just see... I like the fact that Innistrad was covered entirely around by fog, of where they don't know if it's a fully round plane or if it's a flat plane. This is why you like
Zendikar, right? Because it's a shifting royal.
It's because there's something unusual about it. It's not just a random another planet. I know we're not supposed to talk about planets like that, but that's essentially what they do feel like sometimes.
Yeah, in Magic the Gathering, they don't necessarily have planets like celestial bodies in terms of like a solar system. No. They're usually just like our moon or
like
an ancillary
the night sky
planet.
of Nyx is actually the spirit plane of Nyx in the Beyond, that kind of thing. It might have similarities to Zendikar, but since Zendikar is no longer really Zendikar anymore, we could see that. That'd be quite nice. Olgrotha, Homelands, enough said. It has Castle Senga on it. We're not going to see...
We're going to get a Baron Senga card in Commander Legends.
Yeah, we'll probably see a little bit of Olgrotha in there, but we're not going back to Olgrotha. Karsus had Mirror's Depths, a Reflection Realm. Like, there are so many little things where they clearly just showed an idea of, let's just do a cave full of crystals. And I like the idea of this reflection. Imagine if you go to a plane where every single person's mirrored as a doppel.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
And if planeswalkers, they go there and immediately there's a doppelganger created of.
Sure, so like on the plane of Karsus, it's almost like your inner self is reflected back to you by the terrain itself. Maybe if they have these kind of mirror caverns.
Which is quite a nice idea. Yeah. Equilor is super, super interesting. It's super interesting because it is ancient. It is at the edge of time, according to Urza. When Urza originally went there, he found these like ancient these beings that basically have stood the test of time. They don't have simple things like anger and want and need. And the fact that like even the landscape, the mountains they have there are flattened off by time. Like they're almost like plateaus, which is an amazing idea. Bloodhill Bastion. It's two cards: Bloodhill Bastion and the Aeon Fog. Now the Aeon Fog is a fog that covers the entire plane at lower altitudes. And the Bloodhill Bastion is a giant construct made entirely out of flesh. Now, the fact all of these different things, they sound so interesting that I want to kind of explore it further.
Yeah,
the fact that when he left, it took Urza over a century to walk back to Demonaria across the Blind Eternities. That's how far out it is.
That's how, like, in the kind of spatial region.
Yeah,
of,
it's almost like at the edge of the multiverse. And what I like the idea of is that this would be a really good plane if we do a big grand story arc. If we have to go almost like to the edge of time to try and fix the problem. I like this idea of where you can't fix a problem specifically on the plane. You've got to go to the edge of time to Equilor.
Yeah.
It's almost like in the latest Stars where they had to go back to the Sith planet to try and I like this idea of taking lore that's hundreds upon thousands of years old.
Super ancient.
And linking that back into the modern story arc.
That's people why I like Dominaria.
That'd be quite
right,
cool.
I'm going to give you one more.
So, I think Regatha, why was it not the core 2020 plane when it was a plane about bloody Chandra?
Cool, Regatha, yeah.
Why? I mean, I looked at this earlier when I was thinking about Wildfire.
Is this where the place with Mother Luti and like the fire mages?
Why the hell weren't we on that plane when we went to... And this is like the only thing, because I've looked at all the other ones and a lot of them have similarities to other things. Like Fabasin has a Grove of the Dream Pods. It's very much similar to a Simic Golgari vibe of natural selection. There's Muruganda, which is basically like a version of Naya, but it's also like Ixalan. It's the prehistoric plane, but we've kind of already touched on parts of it. And this is where, if you don't create specific isolated, and this is why this is quite an interesting Planeschase thing, because you do get a very small letterbox snippet.
Yeah.
Obviously, how do you expand that to a whole plane? without then just doing that trope to death so you can't do it anymore. Have a look through them. They're very, very interesting. Chandelier, I'd be really annoyed if we don't go back to the Anunnaki catacombs. I know that we've kind of put the chain veil to bed, but I feel like it was done so offhandedly that they could very easily...
There's going to be a lot of retconning from that.
Yeah, I feel like we can really bring that back
novel.
in quite interestingly, because who is the Raven... Like, the whole Raven Man Anunnaki catacomb thing might have been, again, one of the most interesting lore bits of the last 10 years, and they kind of just let it fall flat to the bonus arc.
I think they'll do it.
But yeah, so that's basically a little run by. Again, get the product, even if you can't. Scryfall has all of them there. They're quite interesting, and you can even look into what the effects of the cards do to kind of denote what the plane's going to be like.
I mean, that's the whole point, right?
There's little tidbits like, I wouldn't have known about Equalor had I not done this, and then looked back through, because I had no idea. I didn't realise that the Horizon Bells was somewhere that Dyford and Yorgmoth went to.
Yeah.
These are the kind of things, I automatically find it more interesting if we've already been there hundreds of years ago. It'd be nice to see what it's like now.
Yeah.
The only other one that I haven't properly mentioned is I really want to go back to Kamigawa. I don't know if I want to go back to Kamigawa back in the day and we do as I say, like a day in the life from back in time, or if we see it as it is now. They're going to have to do some massive retconning for it. The problem is that all of the reception of it was so hard to then justify, and I can argue lots of points, but ultimately it comes down to, even if you just made another Asian plane with a completely different mechanics, completely different, not aesthetic. I want the aesthetic to be the same. That's my biggest thing about Kamigawa. It's beautiful.
But then they did the like kind of Mongolian tribes with Tarkit.
If you just don't, eventually they're going to do another Asian inspired plane. Just don't call it something else and go, there's also Kamigawa and then there's New Place.
Sure.
Just go, it's been 4,000 years. Kamigawa could have changed that much.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, guys, this has been our planes that we'd like to see and would like to retire episode. If you've disagreed with us at any point, which is probably very, very likely, do reach out and disagree with us publicly by visiting our Twitter at mtflavouring. We are also doing daily sort of hypotheticals as well within the lore. So I think one of our recent ones was coming off the back of our last episode. We did what would happen to one of the Kenrith twins if one of them got desparked. There's always discussions there. Sometimes it's in poll form, sometimes just in the form of a question. Emails can go to mtflavouring@gmail.com. My Twitter is at AndyManface. Nathan's, yours is...
At the Fox in the Moon.
At the Fox in the Moon. You can hit out at us personally if you really want to take this to the streets.
Hit me personally.
Well, online
swings.
Personally. On the online streets. Please don't punch my face.
Yeah.
Guys, if you haven't shared this podcast around, then I assume it's because you don't really like this podcast and you're ashamed that you're listening to it. But if
don't alienate the people that listen.
Well, no, if they're listening to it now, then...
if you made it to the end of the episode, good job. Now we're going to insult you.
Yeah, well, if they're still listening to it, hey, look, listens in shame run up the same hits as listens in pride, put it that way. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Okay, so you stayed... Oh, okay, I like that. You came for the content, stayed for the eventual philosophical knowledge.
Yeah.
Not the waffles.
Doesn't matter on my little ratings screen. It's all the same to me. But yeah, if you do want to share this out, guys, do share it with a friend. If you have a friend who's not a Vorthos, maybe it's time to turn them. All hail Phyrexia, all will be one.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. We've got a lot of story like that, and it's probably going to be coming up soon. So, and that's one of the things I'm looking forward to. Is that recently we're kind of in a quagmire of there's not really a lot going on story-wise, but we've got Phyrexians.
It will come up soon.
We've got stuff coming up that's going to be a little bit more gritty to get our teeth into.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
More
it's been a little bit
we
bleak.
can be wrong on.
Yeah, sure.
Instead of us just getting angry about the state of magic in general.
I think it will be getting better. And we will be doing more casual episodes like this as well.
Yeah.
And we've got some really good episodes coming up, which we'll be doing shout-outs again on our Twitter, so check us out there. Other than that, guys, thank you very much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.
See you soon.